All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is December 28th, 2021. We are here for PC54, the Community Choice Aggregation Pilot Working Group. My name is Jennifer Grace. I'm the Public Utility Law Judge assigned by the PSC to handle this matter. I'm going to go ahead and read the roll. If your name does not, if you're not identified by a name or identified by a telephone number, please go in the chat and identify yourself like Kevin Carey from AOBA just did. And if it just says your name or just says your organization, please type in your name or your organization in there so everyone knows who's speaking. So far, it looks like we have Kevin Carey from AOBA, Beverly Sikora from BGE, Bob Reaping, Dan Tudor, Daria Pugh, David Bloom, David Hoppick, David Woomer, Drew McAuliffe, Elizabeth Stroud, Fran Francis, Jeffrey Trout, Kenneth Albert, Kevin Carey, Lori McGilvray, Lily Hawkins, Lisa Brennan, Maria LaCastro, Misty Renninger, Peter Wilson, Phil Vanderhayden, Robert Loeb, and Taylor Beckham. Somebody has joined since I just read off the roll that we have so far. It's 1:02 p.m. And I'll put in the chat room asking that anybody who logs on after now, please put your name in the chat so that it can be recorded for minutes. Okay, so the topic of discussion today is the enrollment date. Seeing what the parties' positions are on the earliest date that customers would be enrolled in the CCA and how that affects SOS. Everyone should have received, thank you for your timely filings, your comments. That's great. It gives everyone a chance to look at what's been filed and digest it and maybe, change your position or, have a response. By the time we meet today, you should have received filings from AOBA, Food and Water Watch, OPC, the Joint Utilities, staff, Ms. McGilvray, Leah Gibbons, although that was filed late, and Montgomery County. So let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parties have filed comments for today. I'm not gonna call on each party to go through and restate what you've said in your filing. We're just gonna go under the assumption that everyone has reviewed these and is ready for the meeting today. But we are gonna discuss the enrollment date and SOS and the thing that we've been discussing for the past several meetings. I wanted to start with a question for PEPCO. Montgomery County in its filing suggested that PEPCO look into the system adjustments that would allow it to have a shorter transition period. So it would be transitioning more folks on a day-to-day basis so that it wouldn't take up to 2 months. Is that something that we have an answer to, or is that something that can be done, or what's the status on that request?
Hey, Taylor, is Robbie on? I don't think he's here.
Hi, Dan. He's not. He's on
Yeah,
vacation.
because the latest, all I know is that it's about 5,000 accounts a day that we can handle, which I think is consistent with what the other utilities can do. We'd have to. So the short answer, Judge, is we don't have an answer. We'd have to find out if we could handle more. But from what I know now, it's 5,000 accounts can be switched a day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Turning now to staff, I have a question for staff. If it seems like most of the parties are agreeable to an October 2024 enrollment date, and I see in your filing a definition of enrollment is when a customer begins to take service from the CCA and as opposed to from SOS or retail supply. If if the parties agree that October 2024 is the earliest enrollment date, then is it necessary to go into the second portion of what you filed, which is what needs to happen with SOS bids, specifically, I guess, for PE, but also for BG and PEPCO? Is it necessary for us to look into that now? The reason why I'm asking the question is because clearly we don't have all of the stakeholders in this process, and I don't want to go down the road of making a recommendation to the commission without it being a sound recommendation and without all the stakeholders. I'm not sure that we can do that in this forum. So that's my question for PSC staff.
Your Honor, let me try to field that, and then I think I can capture what our position would be here. What we have determined is that there are bids for PE, which I think they've also concerned about, that will take place in April and June. If we intend to require the enrollments to begin October 1 of 24, which is not consistent with what the PE folks had asked for. They wanted to start for the default enrollment in 25 when their contracts end. The contracts that are going to be affected by that will be bid in April and June coming up. So if we want to allow those contracts to be bid on the current schedule, we don't have to do anything. If we want to recommend that we don't want those contracts to be bid in April and June and have them bid at some later time to be determined, I believe, through the process over the summer, then we need to ask the commission to revise the bid schedule that it has approved. That is any other details about the rest of the bids for PE or for the bids for the other companies, we do not need to do anything with this time.
Okay. Okay, do we have, is Leah Gibbons on the line? Okay. All right. Those were just a couple of questions that I wanted to start off with. I guess I will turn it over to staff to see where we are and what you think needs to be accomplished prior to kind of taking a formal poll as to where we are on this issue today.
All right, thank you, Judge Grace. Again, Phil Vanderheiden from staff. I think we have, in looking at all of the responses, with the exception of the utility folks who continue to have concerns about allowing default enrollments or enrollments generally to begin during a period when an SOS contract that would be affected by the transfer of customers from SOS to the CCA. I think all of the parties, including the county, although it would be good for them to confirm this for us absolutely here as well. Here's that in general, the county has agreed to not begin enrolling customers until October 1 of 24. And if that is the case, then with the exception of Potomac Edison accounts that would be affected, the PEPCO accounts would be unaffected by the contracts that will be in place. Will not be an issue for concerns in the upcoming bids, although we will need to continue to address this in the process. So I think probably what we should do first is confirm that one, the county is still on board with that, or and let them perhaps express to us if there's any other concerns they might have, or any responses they would have to some of the other comments and suggestions. But if the county is willing to hold off on essentially transferring customers until October 1 of 24, I think that solves a lot of the problems that we had addressed, that we had concerns with. So we get to sort of get that squared away. And then I think we would need to hear from Potomac Edison in particular, what their concerns would be if the working group were to ask the commission to simply delay the bids that will affect the Montgomery County customers in April 22 and June 22 bid. I think if Potomac Edison's willing to sort of take into account some changes there, or perhaps offer, what their concerns would be given what they've heard from the county, because I think at the last meeting, and the last time we talked to the company, they had not heard some of the specifics on what the county wanted to do with starting the CCA, and I would like to know maybe if Potomac Edison, having heard the county sort of agree to start later, might have some new ideas about what we should do going forward, or whether or not they're agreeable to what staff has suggested. So number one, if we could hear from the county as to anything else regarding what appears to be their agreement to not start the CCA until, not start enrolling customers until October 1 of 24. And then, in my understanding, the only objections to that schedule was coming from PE. So if we could hear from them as to whether or not the county's sort of clarity on their position has any impact on PE's position.
Bill, this is Stan. I don't think our position's changed from our filing. We're fine with October 1, 2024 to start transferring customers.
And Stan, just so I make sure staff understands where that is. So at that is the first point at which you want to transfer any customers, or simply transferring customers on a default basis, not trying to stir the waters up there, but on the 24th of, or sorry, on October 1 of 24, the way I think we're reading this now, any customers that could transfer by opting in and agreeing to transfer would transfer at the same time as any customers that had opted out, or I'm sorry, that had not taken any action and were simply being transferred to the CCA by default. Those would all occur at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then was there anything in anything else that had been filed by the other folks that you had any concerns with, or otherwise?
Nothing that no, I don't think so. I mean, we obviously need to solve the questions that PE raised, but other than that, nothing stood out.
Okay, so is it fair to say that your position here is the county is agreeable to starting at that date, but otherwise your like how that is achieved is not necessarily something you have as much concern with?
Right. We did not offer any suggestions on how that could be achieved. We assumed that the experts at the Public Service Commission and the utilities would figure out the best way to make that transition happen.
Okay. So hearing that, Judge Grace, I do want to maybe touch base with the BG and the PEPCO folks as well. But maybe if we could first ask Potomac Edison if sort of this position from the county in any way changes their position on objecting to what staff has recommended, which is that we delay the bids that would occur in April and in June, so that the PIP process could take up sort of how to address the transfer of customers and how that would affect the SOS bid process over the summer during the 22 bid process, PIP process. Is Jeff on from there?
Yeah, Jeff is on. Are you ready to hear from me?
Yes.
Great. All right. So first of all, this is Jeff Trout. I'm counsel to Potomac Edison. If it is the consensus of the work group that we should start the CCA in October of 2024. Potomac Edison, regardless of the fact that that will have some impact on Potomac Edison's SOS customers, Potomac Edison is not going to stand in the way of that consensus. So in other words, we're not going to vote against it. I'm not sure that we're going to vote for it because, as I said, this is going to have an impact on our customers, and we don't like that. But if that's where the rest of the working group is coming out, we can see that it's probably the least disruptive solution overall that has evolved so far. So we will not object to it. Now, what we do have a problem with is the adjustment that Mr. Vanderheyden has articulated at least 3 times so far on the call today, which is that we not bid some of the blocks that we were going to bid in April and June in 2-year contracts. We bid our load in a mix of 1- and 2-year contracts, and we spaced those contracts out over time to try to provide the maximum price protection to all of our SOS residential customers. Rather than delaying those bids that would be impacted by this October 2024 date, which are the 2-year block contracts, rather than delaying those to sometime after June of 2024, and therefore increasing the amount of load that would be obtained at one time later in the SOS cycles, the easiest way to accommodate an October 2024 start date is to take the 2-year contracts that would have been bid in April and June of 2022 for Potomac Edison's residential customers, and simply change those to 1-year contracts so that they would expire prior to October of 2024. That way, we will have the full period between now and the fall of 2022 to figure out how to make the transition for all the utilities customers in the fall of 2024. So we affirmatively vote against delaying any of the procurement. What we support as the least disruptive solution would be taking the portion of our residential load that would have been bid as 2-year contracts in April and June of 2024 and bidding those as 1-year contracts. We will need to get the permission of the commission to do that. We are willing to seek that permission at the January 13th SOS bid hearing that's already set up for approval of the bids that are going to occur at the beginning of that week. If the commission wants to do it on another date, that's fine too, but we just need to do it in advance of the April bids so that the bidders in April of 2022 know what they're bidding on. But to summarize, we will not oppose an October 2024 start date. In order to accommodate that, we will change the bid cycle for our customers. But to minimize the impact on our customers of changing the bid cycle, what we propose is simply taking the April and June 2022 2-year contract bids and changing them to be 1-year contract bids.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so it seems to me like changing from a 2-year contract to a 1-year contract would increase volatility, right? It would increase the unknown for bidders. So, and I'm not an SOS expert, but I don't want to tell the commission what the best solution to this is. So my question, without agreeing with staff or agreeing with PE, because I don't have the expertise, and I'm not sure any of us on the call have the expertise to do that and to make that decision. So what I'm saying is that I don't think that we can make we should settle on one position and I don't think it's part of our duties to make that recommendation to the commission, but I mean, we could give the commission possibilities. I'm not sure what format. My question to PE and staff is if there aren't any objections to an October 1st, 2024 start date, and we make a filing within the next week, notifying the commission prior to the January 13th PIP date that we're going to start enrolling customers no earlier than October 1st, 2024. Does that give the stakeholders in the PIP process and the commission and you all, the utilities and staff and the suppliers and everyone, enough time to go ahead and argue with the folks who are the experts on the SOS process and get the commission to come to a decision on what the best way to adjust that process would be before the April and June bids?
The short answer from Potomac Edison's perspective, Your Honor, is yes, it does. Especially if the two alternatives for the commission to consider are either shorten the 2-year contracts or not bid the 2-year contracts until a later date. Either of those could be debated out and resolved in front of the commission sufficiently in advance of the April 2022 bids that the suppliers bidding in April of 2022 will know what they're bidding on. And that's the objective. The objective, that's what would create risk and volatility and risk premiums. If the suppliers don't know for certain what it is they're being asked to bid on, they will either not bid or they'll build in a risk premium. As long as we can tell them in advance with certainty what it is they're bidding on, we should be okay. Either of the solutions, the one that staff has urged or the one that I just articulated, would postpone at least until fall of 2022, when we have to figure out how to do the ultimate transition between the CCA and SOS for all the utilities, including Potomac Edison. It would, in effect, put Potomac Edison in step with the other utilities. I have told you why we don't think that delaying the bids until later is a good idea, because it means more load procured at one time, and therefore more risk of pulling a high price for customers. But ultimately, that's a decision for the commission to make with input, as you said, from all the relevant stakeholders, including wholesale suppliers and retail suppliers, as well as the utilities, the staff, and the expert consultant that the staff has access to in the SOS process.
Okay.
I guess that wasn't as short an answer as I thought it would be.
It was a long question. So BG and Pepco, if the outcome of today is that we look for a CCA customer transition date of October 1st, 2024, does that take care of any issues with the upcoming bids for BG and Pepco?
Yeah, this is Dan from Pepco. Yeah, October 1st, 2024. That protects our April 2022 procurement. So that would allow us the time through the PIP process this summer to talk about other issues. But yes, we would support that.
Yeah, and Judge Grace, good afternoon. This is David Bloom with BGE, and just to support what Dan Tudor just said, we're in agreement.
Okay. There were filings also from OPC and AOBA and Ms. McGilvray. We've not heard from any of you all. Do any of you all want to address the group at this time?
Hi, this is just Kevin Carey with AO, but just, one of the things we brought up in our comments is, the concern with that, obviously all of us are looking at with impacts to standard offer service customers as we do as we transition to Montgomery County as a CCA. And just one thought to ameliorate or eliminate or kind of manage some of that risk is setting it up as a pilot program, which is what is initially described as in the legislation. And and the thought would be, do we limit the subscription in the first go round to a number or a geographical area? And maybe this is a discussion for another time, but that way allowing us to learn from our mistakes in the first go round, understand what needs to be fixed without doing the least amount of harm to folks who stay on SOS service. So it's just a thought of if it's something that would warrant some discussion as, in year one, limit it to similar to what, if anyone remembers back to the initial natural gas deregulation for residential customers. I think it was limited to 25,000 residential customers in year one, going up to 50,000 in year two. So there is precedent for that. And this is back in late 90s. So I think Phil remembers those days, and I'm sure there's other people on this call. But there's just one thought that would kind of eliminate a lot of the concerns that have come up as to risk in the CCA, risk on the SOS. So just want to make sure people just put it out there so people just a thought to consider. So thanks.
Okay, Ms. Hawkins or Ms. McGilvray, Ms. Givens, Mr. Aguilar.
This is Lily Hawkins from Food and Water Watch. In response to Aoba's comment just now about having kind of essentially a pilot of a pilot, I don't think that's what's laid out in the legislation. Originally, the bill was intended to apply to allow CCA programs anywhere in Maryland, and sort of got negotiated through the legislative process, so that would be a pilot where just Montgomery County would start. I think that at Food and Water Watch, we are comfortable with October of 24 as being the time at which everyone has to be transitioned by that time at the latest. We would like to see potentially perhaps an opt-in choice prior to that. Perhaps could be folks who are coming off of retail contracts or some smaller pilot prior to 10/24. But I think by 10/24, if we push it much beyond that, it's not going to be fulfilling the intent of the law as passed.
Okay, thank you. Staff, any other comments from staff?
Judge Grace, this is Lori McGilvray.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to echo the other comments here in support of the October 2024 date. As I said in my comments, I'd appreciate us referring to that date as the CCA customer transition date rather than the CCA start date, acknowledging that there are many steps once the aggregation begins to go through the process. And then that transition after October 1st happen in as expeditious a manner as possible. And then finally, I modified my third point just so that we reserve some time for the discussion of what customers who are coming off third-party retail supply contracts, how they might elect to join the CCA, whether they need to revert to SOS for some period and then transition, or whether, as Lee Hawkins said, there's some kind of opt-in process. But we can hold that discussion for another day.
Thank you. Staff.
Your Honor, I think, and like I said, I really appreciate all the efforts that folks undertook to kind of get here, but I really appreciate PE kind of helping out by clarifying their position on what would be a good path forward. Staff had originally recommended an approach where we simply delay the bids, and that was really intended to sort of give us time to work things out. But I think we can clearly see that the contracts that we're talking about here, if they are not shortened to something other than 1 or 2 years, which I think was part of our original. So we're not trying to hang on to that. But I guess what I'm saying is I think we can agree in principle, and I think we can figure that out after our discussions, which we'll have tomorrow, for 100% behind what Mr. Trout has just proposed here. But I think we're talking about contracts that would begin in June of 23, but would be bid in April and June of 22. And instead of being bid as 2 years, they'll be bid as 1 year. So they'll effectively end when we need them to end. And that's going to be, I think, also achieving any concerns we had about there being uncertainty from the bidders about losses of SOS load, those contracts, since they'll be shortened now. So shortening to a year with the opportunity to sort of sort everything out over the summer is also what we were trying to achieve. So I think we're okay with this, and I think this sort of means that unless sounds like there's no other opposition to this approach, we can we'll need to write something up that will ask the commission to make the change to simply shorten those from 2-year to 1-year contracts, and get that in front of the commission in time for them to consider it at the January 13th SOS bid hearing. I think that's where we need to go forward. And so I don't know if that is something you need us to put together, or if that's something that you want us to draft up and send to you, or how you would want to proceed.
So Phil, we've discussed a bunch of different mechanisms for how to adjust the SOS bid process over the last few weeks. I do not feel that this venue has the expertise or the required stakeholders to make a recommendation on that issue. So my proposal is that I will make a filing with the commission within the next week. That's pretty simple. It's going to say, look, we've come to a decision. The CCA customer transition date, I'm using Ms. McGilroy's language, which means when a customer begins to take service from a CCA, not from SOS or retail supply, that's staff's definition of enrollment, will begin no earlier than October 1st, 2024. It will happen as soon as possible, and that we believe that changes will be necessary in the SOS bid process. Staff, the utilities here are parts of that PIP process, and at that point you can put whatever you think is the appropriate remedy in front of the commission through that process with all of the necessary stakeholders. Is there any reason why that won't work, or what there's a problem with that, staff?
Well, I guess at first impression, no, I think that at work, I understand you would not want to make that recommendation to changes in the PIP process coming out of this working group. So we'll need, so I guess, and we'll have to talk amongst the staff folks. Sounds like you'll need some party to bring that to the commission's attention, ask them to make that revision, probably as soon as possible prior to the April bid. And I guess the next opportunity where 9064 is docketed is the June 13th. So it sounds like basically a party will need to ask the commission to make that change, and then they'll be able to rule on that at the hearing. Okay, I think I understand that. Yeah,
I think my notifying the commission that this is what's happening and copying the folks in 9064, is that the right number? In the SOS docket will be enough that the commission will take this up at the or at least tee it off at the January 13th PIP hearing that's already scheduled.
Okay, yeah, that's probably the best way to get it, and something that's already noticed, docketed.
So I see hands raised by Taylor Beckham from PHI and Robert Loeb.
Robert, I think you were before me. You can go ahead or else I'll hop in.
Hi, this is Robert Loeb. I appreciate very much Jeffrey Trout's suggestion that Potomac Edison would change its bid process. And I think we should support that and have him, because he said he would file something in front of the commission on January 13th. And I think that would make all the utilities have the same start date, which is what we're looking for. I see no reason not to support PE's position. Thank you.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. The Potomac Edison is a person of record, a company of record in the other docket. So there's a docket that's already having a hearing on January 13th. So they've already, PE has already said that if I ask for objections, that they're not going to object to an October start date. And it will be on PE to suggest to the commission that the best way to change PE's PIP or PE's SOS bid process is to shorten the time frame. What I'm suggesting is that we do not have an expert in this case, in this working group on this issue, that I am not willing to make a recommendation to the commission, not having an expert that says that shortening a bid from 2 years to 1 year is not going to sufficiently change the price of the bids or the amount of folks bidding due to changing in volatility. I'm just not willing to make that recommendation. So I do support what PE has said. What I'm suggesting is that this is not the forum to come to a decision on how to change the PIP process. There already is a forum for that.
Your Honor, this is Jeff Trout, and I apologize both to you and to Taylor. I can't find the button that lets me raise my hand. But what I believe I heard staff say a few minutes ago is that they would consider the process. They would consider the option of shortening the contracts rather than bidding them at a later time. And if that's the case, then assuming no one else, none of the other utilities care about what we do with our contracts, we would appear to have in this group consensus. So I am fully supportive of your reaction, which is that the issue of what to do with PE's contracts belongs in the standard offer service PIP work group, not in this work group. We have a well-established process for making changes in the SOS work group. One or more parties, staff or another party circulates a proposal. All the stakeholders react to it. It then gets submitted usually by staff to the commission. And as I said, I unless somebody persuades us otherwise between now and the 13th of January, I would be willing and able to go to the hearing on the 13th of January and argue in favor of shortening the 2-year blocks to 1-year blocks in our April and June 2022 bid rounds as being the least impactful and easiest way to accommodate an October 2024 customer start date for the CCA. That said, I think the members of the PIP need to get together. Staff usually leads that process. I would be looking to staff to do so again. I thought I heard Mr. Van der Hayden refer to a meeting that's going to occur tomorrow. And if that's a meeting to which the utilities are invited, I am not aware of it, but I don't always get all my emails. So maybe he can explain what that meeting is.
Jeff, staff typically has an after action meeting for these calls. So before I committed us 100% to agreeing with what you proposed, I needed to sort of check with the rest of our folks, make sure we're good on that.
Entirely understandable, and it's also understandable that I wouldn't be invited to that meeting.
Okay, Taylor Beckham.
Thank you. I just more so had a process question / suggestion. Your Honor, I heard you say that you're going to be looking to file, I guess, that the working group has reached consensus on the start date sometime within the next week. But just wanted to see if you could circulate that to us for our review and possible, edit prior to the filing with the commission.
So I'm just going to make a filing noting it's just going to be a small filing. It's going to be giving the commission notice of what we've been discussing and where we are. And yes, but let me do this. Yes, I will let you know what I'm filing, and you can file comments if you want to. Let's go. Oh, well, Bev, you have to hold on. I see you raising your hand, but you're just going to have to hold on. Sorry. Let me ask. Whoever has an objection to a CCA customer transition date of no earlier than October 1st, 2024, please raise your hand and state that now. And if you don't know how to raise your hand like Jeff Trout, what you do is you, in the participants box, which should be on the right side of your screen, if you hover your cursor over your own name, there's a little hand and you can click on that and raise your hand. Okay, so I'm hearing no objections to a CCA customer transition date of no earlier than October 1st, 2024. Bev, it's your turn.
Right now I couldn't find the unmute button. So the only thing I was wondering is, the commission issued a notice, or I think they've already issued a notice for the hearing on the 13th. Do they, and it's pretty specific that all it's going to do is consider the auction results. Do they need to issue an amended notice to say that, something else is going to get addressed? Because just because.
They would, which is why I'm looking to file this as soon as possible.
Okay.
And Bev, I think the commission could discuss the issue on the 13th and then have a follow-on hearing shortly thereafter to rule.
Yes.
So I'm not worried about due process being fulfilled. The commission is very attentive to that, and they will do whatever is needed. But we should discuss this in front of the commission as soon as reasonably possible.
Which is probably the earliest date is that January 13th date, since there's already a hearing scheduled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm opening the floor to whoever wants to comment at this point. Okay, hearing none. Staff. We're going to be moving on from this topic at the next meeting, and I wonder if I can pull it up. To share. Staff had earlier created an agenda for the next couple of topics that we needed to address. So do you recall, or do you want to give me a moment and I can find it? What are next proposed for us to meet on? What issues are next proposed for us to meet on?
Yes, Your Honor. We the next topic we're going to go into addresses the billing and enrollment. We've got 4 meetings estimated for that. But the next thing we're going to do is address the billing process. Specifically, staff is going to try to put together kind of a straw man billing proposal. It will have to be fairly high level unless we have some opportunity to talk in some detail with the utility folks. And much in the same way we did with the kind of the initial discussions on the transition. We're just going to propose something, try and get that out to the group, you know, the week before the meeting, and then try to, you know, introduce the concept and talk about it. I think we're expecting that the billing process is going to be what is referred to as utility consolidated billing without a lot of variations. I think one of our simplifying assumptions is that we use a process very similar to what retail choice does. I think we're going to present that, get feedback on what folks have to say about that, and try to see if our assumptions are correct. And if they are, that would probably be like a 1.5 meeting discussion. Although there will be some like follow-on issues that we'll need to straighten out. So that we had scheduled for January 18th, but I think that was when we assumed we were skipping today as a meeting. So I don't know if you want, we may be able to move that back to the 11th, depending on what your schedule looks like. After that initial meeting on the billing process, we will want to talk about enrollment issues. That I think we're going to need to make a similar type of kind of high level proposal, get some feedback as you know, on that straw man, and then process that after we get feedback over the next 2 or 3 meetings afterward. And ultimately, this gets us January and February, and we should have something in place which allows us to describe what will happen operationally at the time of transition. Then for enrollments and switches and that sort of thing that occur afterward. In amongst that discussion, although our chart did not, or our proposed agenda did not have specific details on it, we will need to talk about things like, you know, what happens when a customer comes off a retail contract, what happens, you know, to customers during the process of opting in and opting out, and then issues related to out and that sort of thing. So I think you can probably go back to that schedule. If folks don't have it, we can send it around again. But it generally talk about billing first, and talk about enrollment, with billing expected to be with some hope that it's going to be relatively simple, and enrollment understood to probably take 2 or 3 meetings to work through. And after that, we have not developed a more detailed meeting schedule for, you know, all the other details that are in play. But the thought is that billing and enrollment probably will require some utility work on their systems, and we want to make sure we get that stuff knocked out early.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we'll expect something from staff to tee off the billing process or the utilities on January 4th. We'll have a work group meeting on January 11th, same time, same bat channel. We'll expect something else, teeing off enrollment issues on the 18th, and we'll have another work group meeting on the 25th. And we should expect probably another 1 or 2 meetings to complete our discussion on billing and enrollment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we're trying to schedule getting through this basically by March 1, I think was our meeting. I think maybe the week before that now, based on starting on the 11th.
Okay.
After that, we will probably try to. I don't know that we can get you the high level comment on the 4th. I think we may need the 5th to do that, just because there's holiday stuff going on. And if possible, I think we're going to try and reach out to particular the PEPCO folks to see if we can have a discussion maybe sometime early in that first week of January to sort of inform our straw man. I don't know if Robbie Atkins is available, if he's back, but someone on his team that I think we're going to be dealing the mass enrollment on the PEPCO system. I think is one of our primary concerns about how to manage that. We understand that there are some constraints, as we talked about earlier, that limit X number of accounts per day. We want to maybe drill into that with the company folks a little bit before we send our straw man out to make sure that that's as informed as possible. So, yeah, to maybe the PHI folks, reach out and see if any of your folks are available to have some discussions with us before we release that. But maybe the 5th would be better to get that out. I know it's not.
Sure.
Bill, oh, sorry, Judge Grace, I don't mean to cut you off. Mrs. Taylor, I just want to make sure, because I know Robbie's not here, you're thinking about trying to connect with our folks maybe on the 5th?
Yeah. What is that? Well, I think we're going to try to send something to the working group on the 5th. I don't know if you're available. I mean, we'd like to talk to you before we try to put a straw man together, because I think we'll be better informed if we update ourselves on the concerns that and sort of the approach that will be used to enroll customers.
Right. Well, you can just go ahead and send me an email, and I can corral our folks, and we can schedule that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can probably be fairly flexible, but like the 3rd and the 4th, I don't know if folks are back yet, but I think our folks will be at it trying to put something together. So I'll send you an email, and just to the extent you've got folks who are able to sort of know the ins and outs of enrollment process and what it would look like to do this in large scale, that'd be helpful. I don't want to leave out the BG&E folks and the PE folks, so to the extent that any of their folks are able to, or if it's okay for kind of a joint utility discussion on that to make sure we're all on the same page, just in case, that'd be great. But we can probably do some of that later on. I just don't want to send something out to the group with a straw man that has without some opportunity to touch base with the technical people, because I think we're going to get into the weeds pretty fast.
Phil?
We will be happy to participate in such a discussion.
Thank you, Jeff.
Phil, looking at what some of the other jurisdictions who have done a similar program is not going on these subject matters is not going to be useful in preparing some of the other parties to participate in these discussions. Is there anything else that you can think of that other parties can do if they want to do homework so that they're ready to enter into these discussions?
So I think probably, I think just kind of going in, I think we are making some assumptions here that enrollment and billing for the CCA is going to look a lot like retail choice billing in Maryland, the way it operates now. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, is there a document that lays that out in some detail? I can't think of one that staff has put together recently. So would you be going back a decade or more so you got that sort of description? Let me ask the utility folks, are there any documents that are publicly available on the utility websites or that you provide to retail suppliers that sort of familiarize them with the billing and enrollment process in Maryland? Utility folks, if you know. If not, maybe there isn't anything, but that strikes me as kind of the first kind of set of like operational rules. The only other thing, I mean, there's COMAR, and that's COMAR 2053 for electricity residential customer protection. That I think addresses sort of the consumer protection rules, which I assume we're going to be following something. So COMAR 2053 on the DSD website, the Department of State Documents website. Google like Maryland COMAR, you'll probably find it almost right away. And then the commission in Title 20. And then also there's supplier coordination tariffs, but I don't know how much of that detail. So each utility's got supplier coordination tariffs that sort of dictate the relationship between retail suppliers and the utility and how they have to transact.
So I'll ask just if as you're preparing for your straw man on January 5th, if you come across any documents that are publicly available that might help with some background education on these subjects, it'd be great if you could send it to the group, because the more homework we can do outside of these meetings, the more we can get done inside of these meetings.
Yeah, we'll put together like an email with the links to the COMAR and to the supplier coordination tariffs, PEPCO, BGE, which I think we can get our hands on pretty easily. And if the utility folks think of any other documentation that explains retail choice operations that are sort of readable at the policy level, or maybe even not, if folks want to really delve, send those to me. We'll incorporate that in what we send out. So I think we could do that. We'll send something out tomorrow with those links on it.
Thank you, Phil.
Yep.
Does anybody else have any subjects for the group to take up at this time? Okay, hearing none. So look for an email from me with a draft of what I'm going to send to the commission. It's going to be very simple. And look for an email from staff with some background that you can take a look at so that we can have a good discussion on our next meeting. And we'll see everyone on Tuesday, January 11th at 1 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good holiday.
Happy holidays.